Hey guys, welcome. So for today, we're going to be first choosing some options to begin with. You can choose from female portraits, male portraits, and some backgrounds. You can look through them, figure out which pose or which portrait you think is the most interesting. Whichever one you choose, you might want to erase the rest or just simply drag the ones you want on the top and hide the rest in case you need some for later if you end up doing the extension. So now I'm choosing a background and I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to kind of drag it to the top and resize it and kind of arrange. And this is going to be your first check-in of the day, just showing me or Mr. Tron what you've chosen as your portrait and your background. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spend quite a bit of time really making a good selection. So I like the pencil, you know this. I always set my setting on the top to path, and I zoom super close and make really good selections. Now, the better your selection on this, the better the overall effect. If you rush your selection or you try to use something, let's say, like a lasso tool that doesn't have like the detail we need for a person, it's not going to look good. So the majority of your time today will be spent on making a really good selection of your person. I'm going to speed up this next part, but you're going to see I'm going all the way around the portrait to make sure I get a clean selection. Once I've closed my shape, I'm going to hit make selection, press OK. And then because I have a person who has hair, I'm always going to refine the edge because I'm definitely going to cut out some of this woman's hair. So I'm going to go up to select, refine edge. I'm just going to spend a few more minutes making sure I clean up her hair so that the selection looks really neat. Remember, we used this before for fur or for hair. White is the part we're going to keep. Black is the part we're not going to keep. But gray is the part where it's kind of hair or fur. So I'm going to paint with gray over any parts of her hair that I might have chopped off. So I'm just lowering the border because everything else is really good. It's just the hair I want to fix so I can get her pretty hair in the picture. And so I'm now going to paint with gray, lower my brush size, and go around the halo of her head to make sure I get a nice selection of her hair. Now that I have a good selection, I'm going to spend a minute or two arranging my person onto my background. Now, if you choose a background you realize it doesn't look so good, you can swap your background around. You're going to see I do this quite a bit. I resize to try to make sure that she makes sense in proportion to the image and that her feet are looking like they're on the ground somewhere. So I'm going to play around with the sizing a bit. I might change my mind later, but let's see how this looks. The next part of today's activity takes a little bit of research on your end. You're going to research a superhero you want this person's shadow to emulate. Any superhero you like, but you really want to think about some of the position of the body, right? I want like a flying Wonder Woman to be her shadow, but you can choose whichever you like. Just consider the position of the body. For example, if the person, is facing forward, maybe you want your superhero also to be facing forward. Just things to consider. When you research your photo, you're going to download it and bring it in here by going to File, Open in Place. I have one here for Wonder Woman. And then we're going to do the same thing we did with our portrait, and we're going to take a few minutes selecting out our silhouette. Now, you notice that I have a cartoon of Wonder Woman, not a real person. It's not really going to matter because I'm getting the silhouette. I'm just going to paint this all with black eventually, so it doesn't matter if it's a photo or a vector drawing of it. Just make sure it has like a nice shape that you want the shadow to be. Once you have a selection, I'm actually selecting the background out, so I'm just going to hit delete. I'm actually going to rasterize this first. Right click, rasterize, then hit delete. If you select the person, then you want to hit select inverse, then delete. Basically, you just want person by themselves. Now, my character is facing this way, but my person's facing this way, so I'm going to flip her around by going to edit, transform, and hit flip horizontally just so she's in the same angle. And then I'm going to resize her a little bit. Basically what I'd like to do in this image now is turn this into a gradient of black to gray so it looks like a shadow. To do that, I'm going to need to activate this layer as a selection. And we know to do that, we hold down Control or Command, we click on the thumbnail. Now I have the Wonder Woman selected. I'm going to activate my gradient tool. And I'm going to change my gradient to a black to gray. And then because I have my selection activated, when I paint with my gradient, it won't paint my whole background. It'll paint only in the selection. Think about your light source. Do you want the shadow to kind of taper off as it goes up, which is what I want? So I want the darkest color on the bottom, the lightest towards the hair. When I'm happy, I'm going to deselect. And now I'm going to position this Wonder Woman shadow underneath the picture of the woman. I'm going to rotate just a smidge so her feet line up a little bit more. Try to line up your people's feet. Like obviously this woman has both feet on the ground or mostly, and the Wonder Woman is partially flying, but I want one of the feet to line up. The next thing we want to do is transform this so that the shadow, the cast shadow, is in appropriate perspective or angle. And one way to do this is going to Edit, Transform, and hitting Perspective. When you hold down Perspective, I always like to hold down Command as I pull. It allows me to pull everything in perspective at the same time. If you don't hold down Command, it'll just do up and down, which is not really helpful in this instance. So I'm dragging while holding down Command or Control if you're on a PC to pull the shadow in an angle. There's a few other transformations you can apply, like distort or warp, if you feel like it looks a little too flat. Okay, now the last step is to blur this a little bit so the shadow doesn't look as intense. To do that, we're going to go up to Filter, Blur, and hit Gaussian Blur, and just take down the radius to about 6. Nothing too blurry where we can't make it out. And then the last thing is to lower the opacity to about 50. We don't want it to be super intense. We want it to look like an actual shadow. If 50 is too low, you can bring it up a bit. It depends the background color as well. All right, and there you have it, your superhero shadow. Now, if you want to challenge yourself, bring in a second individual into the layout and add a different superhero shadow behind them to create a team of superheroes. Be patient and make good selections today. Good luck.